Good evening, and thank you for joining this special edition of Healthy Heart Nation's special report. The New York CNN reported that jurors have found R&B singer R. Kelly guilty of racketeering, including acts of bribery and sexual exploitation of a child, along with separate charges of sex trafficking. In this federal case in the Eastern District of New York, Kelly faced a total of 9 counts, 1 count of racketeering, with 14 underlying acts that included sexual exploitation of a child, kidnapping, bribery, and sex trafficking charges, and also 8 additional counts of violations of the Mann Act, a sex trafficking law. Kelly was found guilty of 9 counts, 1 count of racketeering, and 8 counts of violating the Mann Act. Of the 14 underlying acts for the racketeering count, he needs to be found guilty of at least 2 to be convicted of that count. Jurors found prosecutors have proven all but 2 of the 14 underlying racketeering acts. The New York Times article entitled, "How the Black Woman Around R. Kelly's Case Feel About His Conviction," reported, Mr. Kelly's case has been widely viewed as a crucial moment for the #MeToo movement, serving as the first high-profile trial since the national reckoning around sexual misconduct to feature a powerful man whose victims were primarily Black women. In the days and weeks that preceded the jury's verdict, many observers said they feared the stories from a group of Black accusers, no matter how harrowing, might be dismissed. Instead, R. Kelly conviction on Monday was viewed by many as a powerful validation of the accounts of both those who took the stand against him and others whose stories have never been made public. One of the alleged victims said she watched the stories of other women who looked like her be brushed aside before. Black women are overlooked so often because people say, well, you dress this way, look that way, you acted that way, you put yourself in that situation, she said. But this time, the response was unfamiliar. Not only did they see us, did they hear us, they believed us, said the woman. Mikki Kendall, an author from Chicago who had written about feminism and the intersectionality, stated, "This moment will go one of 2 ways," she said. "Either we will finally say that Black women and girls deserve to be protected, or we're going to say again, as we have, this idea that Black girls are unrapeable because of their skin color." So the one and only question for this brief discussion is, how does the R. Kelly verdict impact the Black community? My guest moderator tonight is attorney Devonna Roseberry, who, among other things, is a child advocate. Today, we are also joined by our special guest panelist, attorney Joseph McKenzie, who is a criminal defense attorney out of the DMV area, and Nicole Hardy, an education specialist out of Southern California. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you guys for joining. I know this was last minute and we really kind of pulled this together because we wanted to make a statement as members of the Healthy Heart Nation about what is happening and what is real time. So let's go back to that initial question. How does the R. Kelly verdict affect or impact the Black community? Attorney Roseberry, I'll start with you.
Yes, I think that certainly this verdict, the case itself was just one that all eyes were on. Everyone was looking at this case, and I believe, well, even before the case began, what struck me was the documentary that came out, where there were so many women who told their stories. And then, of course, after that, he was charged and the case began. So I think it's had a huge impact, starting for me, certainly from that documentary, where I believe I certainly believe that my eyes were opened a little wider. There always have been some rumblings and some conversation about Mr. Kelly, but I think that documentary for me and for many others, especially Black women, certainly opened our eyes to just the gravity of this case.
Absolutely. Attorney McKenzie, what are your thoughts on how this will impact the Black community specifically?
Well, I think one of the things to point out is to look back at history. Um, the Mann Act, which I believe 8 or 9 counts were charged under, was formerly named the White Slave Trade Act, or White Slave Trafficking Act. And that was originally implemented back in 1909. I think it became law in 1910 or 11.
Wow.
And it was labeled the White Slave Trafficking Act because so many women were being trafficked and traded across state lines for immoral acts.
Okay.
And back then, immoral acts could have been anything from adultery to, just simple things that a conservative person would not approve of. Luckily, what falls under that umbrella are underage children. And, this country has a long way to go. But to this country's credit, there's been an improvement. The White Slave Act, White Slave Trafficking, does not only apply for white women anymore, it applies to all women. Years ago, Black women were, and still to this day, are the least believed victims when it comes to sexual assaults. No one believes them, and particularly when you're going up against somebody famous or somebody white. But yesterday, the jury, which had white people on them, believed these Black women.
Yeah.
And ignored the accusations of them being victims. Gold diggers. They ignored the accusations of them being gold diggers or money hungry. What do you call the ones that hang out with bands? Groupies. Yes. And they said these are legitimate victims. And one of the most powerful people that aided them in their stories was his personal assistant, who confirmed and testified. So everybody was believed. And I can tell you, as an attorney, when it comes to the judicial system, Black women are the least listened to. They are the most ignored, and they are the most voiceless people. And when you ask what is the significance for the Black community, for Black women, as you know, since the Me Too movement has started, Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby, a lot of them were the darling of American white women. But here we have a consistent lining up of Black females. And we're not talking about Black females like Jada Pinkett or Vivica Fox. We're talking about Black female who would typically and normally be voiceless, who are able to have their voices heard and get justice. So I think that's powerful for Black women.
Absolutely. Thank you. Nicole, what are your thoughts on this, the impact of the verdict on our community?
I think so many points have already been touched on, and I completely agree with the other panelists. I work with underage girls in secondary level of our school system. And one of the things that we, especially as Black administrators, notice that really it's a battle for the souls of Black girls because of the well researched now, unfortunately, disproportionality of whether Black young ladies are believed.
Right.
And what I mean by believed is when they make statements, whether those statements are dismissed instantly because of the color of their skin, the way their hair looks, for
Mhm.
example, or how it sounds when it
Right.
comes out. So to be heard is one of the biggest things that can come from this, I think, that they were heard. And
Right.
if we can translate that into other areas, I think the lesson, it won't just last from yesterday and today, but will continue to really hopefully move us forward with protecting the souls of our Black girls and
Yes.
helping them to feel that they are safe within our society.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree with you more. Devonna, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I was just thinking about Black women being heard and Black girls being heard. You know, one of the things that certainly hope comes out of this is that more women, more young girls will come forward
Right.
and will not be hesitant or afraid to tell their truth, to report, you know, a crime, to report an injustice. That's really what I hope comes from this, because in our community for so long, or your auntie or your dad or whomever, you know, just told you what happens in this house or in this family stays in this family. So I hope that it does give, you know, give our young girls the confidence to speak up for themselves and protect themselves.
Absolutely. And I know we had, you know, in some of our discussions, our pre-discussions, we talked about those statistics, like 1 in 4 women have been assaulted in their lifetime. I don't know if that is the actual the number, but I think that's what that it's higher than that, Joe. Or
That's just what's reported.
yeah,
That is just what's reported. From women who are afraid to come forward. I
right,
believe it's 2 in 4. I believe half the women walking around
right,
on this planet have been sexually assaulted.
right, right,
It's been going on for millennia.
right. Right. And so with this verdict, you know, and it's coming forth and him being charged with, you know, with the crime, or at least they're being heard, they're being seen, and, you know, their issues and complaints are being validated. So, you know, in that regard, I think that, you know, it is definitely something that needed to be noted and it needed to be addressed. You know, and as a part of the Healthy Heart Nation, you know, we are working toward eliminating disparities in the Black community. And you can't eliminate a problem that you don't identify, right? So, you know, we have to be brave enough to be able to come forth and say, this is an issue, this is a problem. Us not talking about these types of things aren't going to make them go away. And ultimately, you know, we have a responsibility in the Black community to protect the Black woman in this community, you know, who has, you know, undoubtedly, you know, bore the majority of these, you know, our issues and our concerns, and have silently wept and dealt with a lot of challenges that our community has faced. And it is about time that, you know, we are heard and we are validated. Nicole, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
I wanted to point out the space and time factor that we saw. So the Me Too kind of movement came about, but these weren't allegations that were new for him. So oftentimes people worry about, well, what if I wait too long, or
Right.
when can I come forward, if it's now or later. You know, statute of limitations, and understanding that as a young person, because while these kids were young, the justice piece didn't come till much later. I like to encourage people to understand that that sense of justice can still be had. You can never get back some of those years, the damage is done. So maybe before we end this, I would love to be able to offer people like, some research and help
Right.
resources, right, for help. And that would be my goal before the end of this program.
Absolutely.
And Joe,
Absolutely.
maybe, I don't practice criminal law. That's Joe's area of expertise. Maybe you can speak a little to the statute of limitations and just kind of what that means, so that
Well,
the
I would say
layperson
this.
understands.
Years ago, pretty much every state had a certain statute of limitation, a time frame in which you can bring charges against someone for rape or some form of sexual assault. But I think because we are a maturing nation and a maturing people have started to understand that it is unusual for women to come forward right away.
Mhm.
It is unusual for them. It takes maturity, it takes counseling, it takes support. Unfortunately, in some communities, it takes saying it over and over again before you're believed. And sometimes the statute of limitations have run its course. Sometimes, these are the more difficult ones. Sometimes you can experience trauma, the trauma of rape or sexual assault at a certain age. And because we have such fascinating brains, and the mind, the way the mind, it's very wonderfully made.
Mhm.
One of the defense mechanisms is to totally block it out. You
Right.
can forget it.
Right.
And there can be things or time that could allow it to resurface. Now, when you step into court, that can be extremely difficult to overcome because
Mhm.
your status as a witness and your testimony is heavily compromised.
Right.
But that has changed. I have seen situations that come across the most extreme one, and it took place. It came across my desk, and it was being prosecuted by Prince George's. Was it Prince George's County? No, Montgomery County. And it took place in a certain church that many of you all are familiar with. And it took place in the 60s.
Mhm.
And the prosecutors actually charged this guy for sexually assaulting a woman in the 60s.
Mhm.
So we're talking 50, 60 years ago.
Right.
But it took place.
Right.
Now, that's a double-edged sword because statute of limitations are there for a purpose. People's memories can
Right.
fade, they can be altered. And when you come into court, things must be beyond a reasonable doubt.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of doubt when things happened 20, 30 years ago, or
Right.
when it happened to you when you were 5 or 4 or 3 versus, yeah, this happened 6 months ago and he raped me, did this, or she raped me, she did this. It's more credible the more recent it is. But statute of limitations, as you can see with Harvey Weinstein, they were going way back.
Mhm.
They were bringing back women who were kind of old. Same thing with Cosby.
Yeah.
Actually, no, Cosby was charged with an offense that took place years and years ago. Same thing with Harvey Weinstein. But in those cases, the memory was vivid. So relaxing the statute of limitations was appropriate. But we
Right.
have to be very careful. If we're going to relax the statute of limitations, we need to make sure that the victims who are coming forward are credible. Credible, for one, for not making it up. You'd be
Right.
surprised. This is what damages legitimate accusers.
Right.
The legitimate accusers get a bad rap because there are so many women that come forward and say, "Oh, you're breaking up with me? You have a new girlfriend? You have a new child with your new girlfriend? You're paying her more child support than me? You know what you did to me a couple weeks ago? You either physically abused me or you sexually abused me. And I have personally been involved with um, uncovering lies.
Right.
Sometimes you have young kids. I had one girl, she was in tears, but I was able to talk to her gently, and she eventually admitted to me that she made it up. And her
Okay.
babysitter told me, um, when the accusations first came out, be careful because this child is very troubled. I don't know if you want to believe her.
Mhm.
And normally, when a 10 or 11-year-old comes into my office and tells me, yeah, it's true, my stepdaddy did molest, I believe them. So I didn't believe the babysitter. But after a while, um, she admitted that she made it up. And there's the whole, this new guy that my mother is dating, this new person that my mother's with, I don't like him. He doesn't let me do this. He's not
Right.
going to replace my dad. I'm going to make up charges.
What I also heard a lot on the news in terms of some of the coverage was, the question about, why did it take so long, for the verdict with R. Kelly to happen? Is it safe to say that in a situation like this, that it's better late than never? Or what are the implications on the fact that it did take as long as it did in order for it to reach this verdict?
Well, um, the prosecutor is a genius, and correct me if I'm wrong. Is she a black woman? The prosecutor in the States?
Don't think she was.
Okay.
Right.
There is a federal black
I'm not
prosecutor
sure.
who is coming.
We'll look her up. We'll look her
Yeah.
up.
Okay. Well, this prosecutor in this case was brilliant because she did not, and this is going to go to, because they prosecuted him on stuff that took place in the 90s.
Okay.
So in order to do that, and enter in racketeering.
Yes, that was the question I had. I didn't fully understand how that worked. So yes, could you explain that one for us?
Yes, racketeering is criminal conduct that
Okay.
is systemic and that is organized and structured. So for example, if you and your friends say, hey, let's go rob this Tiffany's or this CVS and let's get as much as we can, and then let's pawn it and let's just go our separate ways and then we're done. Okay, so
Right.
that's a criminal act. That's robbery, that's burglary, that's theft,
Mhm.
that's breaking and entering, that's a whole bunch of stuff. You finish, you're gone. Okay. But what if you all say, hey, let's form a group and let's go around the
Right.
country, or let's go around town
Mhm.
robbing, stealing. Let's go from state to state robbing each and every CVS that we come upon, because they
Mhm.
have special drugs in their pharmacy section.
Right. Right.
And you have a set amount of people, and it's structured like they're conspiring, they are employees. It's an organization. You don't even have to have a name, but if it's structured like an organization and
Okay.
people are working towards the main goal of the group, which is
Mhm.
robbing the CVSs, if law enforcement catches you in 2020 and they look and they interview people, they interview witnesses, they interview members who are part of this robbing group who's going around the CVSs, and they see, oh, this thing goes all the way back to 1991
Okay.
or 1989.
So
Then
it's more about the depth and the breadth of it and the repetition as well.
the repetition,
Okay.
and it's sort of like it's a gang activity,
Mm.
and it's done systemically, and it's done in an organized, structured manner. And if you can
Okay.
tie the acts of the individuals that, let's say in 1991, a CVS was robbed,
Mhm.
and then you come back all the way to 2020, CVS was robbed, but it was done by the same group of people under the same umbrella, with the same
Okay.
directions, the same motive, the same goal. Then you can reach all the way back
Okay.
beyond statute of limitations and bring that forward to 2020 and say this is one ongoing scheme.
Okay.
This is one ongoing robbery and theft scheme. Well,
Mhm.
R. Kelly was trafficking young women, underage girls, across state lines since the 90s,
Wow.
since he was a young man in his 20s, all the
Okay.
way till he got arrested, or maybe a couple of years before he got arrested. I don't know if he was still doing it after his trial 13 years ago, but that's how they were able to reach back and go over the hurdle of statute of limitations, because
Okay.
it's all one continuing criminal enterprise. So that's why it took so long, because other prosecutors and other strategies wouldn't allow them to go so far back. But the
Okay.
way they did it under the RICO statute, racketeering, they can go back. They can go way back.
Okay.
And that's how they get the mob, you know.
So what are the possibilities of the people who worked with R. Kelly to groom these women, or to get them, like his assistants and all these other people who were involved in it? Would it be safe to say that they also may be brought up on charges, or would their testimonies more than likely given as pleas to not be charged?
Well, in one news story, I heard that there were many players involved. There were recruiters, there were
Okay.
planners, there were a bunch of people. And
Okay.
I don't know if sometimes prosecutors will ignore low-level people because they were, but for R. Kelly, or but for the mastermind,
Okay.
they would not have done this. They did their little deeds for the time being, and then that was it.
Okay.
Finding many of them may be problematic. But
Mhm.
what surprised me, but then again didn't surprise me, is that his personal assistant was not charged. But
Okay.
that's what surprised me. But what didn't surprise me is that she wasn't charged because she was their star witness.
Right.
And it
Okay.
seems like she wasn't involved in locking up some of the women and doing any abusive stuff. She would take them to the malls. She would bring them food. She was doing whatever she was told to do, but she knew what was going on.
Okay.
And it's hard to prosecute somebody who had knowledge of, or who was so peripherally involved for something that took place so long ago. But the prosecutor says, hey, you were his right-hand woman. You were right there on the scene. Give us testimony. Assist us. And she did. And they said they believed her because she had firsthand courtside
Account.
seats to
Right.
everything that was going on. And she was vital. And she was a huge part of why they got a conviction.
Okay.
His personal assistant.
Got it.
Yeah. But again, well, I don't know. I'll let you go.
No,
Go ahead.
go ahead. I was just going to say that the prosecutor's name is Elizabeth Geddes.
Who's who?
Looks like Elizabeth Geddes.
Elizabeth Getty. Is she a Karen? I mean, is she a sister, or is she what?
She does not appear to be African American.
Okay. Well, you know what? She did a lot of work on behalf of African
Yes,
American
she
women.
did. Yes,
Yes,
she
she
did.
did.
Thank you.
Yes, she did.
Yes,
She would have done it
definitely.
with white women. So hey,
Definitely an ally. Definitely an ally.
yeah.
Nicole, did you want to add anything to what was said so far in terms of like your take on the whole situation?
So I'm on the receiving end, the impact end. So when for popular culture, right, when young people see certain things that come up in the news and how that's perceived with their world, the culture of the rap culture, R&B culture sometimes, and how that's perceived not only from within our, Black society, but then also when people look at us from the outside, right? So that
Right.
the sociology piece to that. And so sometimes I look at that lens and how kids will interpret and either reenact or play or bring it into their conversations. So one of the things that I like to see happen within our society is, again, to talk about it. And
Right.
traditionally, as Black parents, how often are we talking about these things with our
Right.
kids
Right.
before they go out with their friend or peer, or watching something on, on a video, or, whether that's YouTube or a little clip on some of the other popular social media pieces. So
Right.
how do we present talking points for families so that we can speak to our young people about seriousness, and then also help support some of the adults, because some of the adults have a hard time talking about molestation or
Right.
rape or beatings or kidnappings or being held hostage or trafficking. For them to even articulate those words, I think, can be difficult. So I'm really thank Joseph for giving us not only the legal pieces of it, but being able to say some of those words, and it's okay to have those really difficult conversations.
Absolutely. I mean, it starts as a conversation, right? I mean, everything kind of starts from there. And and I do think that within our community, we have a strong sense of protection when it comes to our, when it comes to our Black men, right? More so than maybe in some instances, even the Black women. Like, as a Black woman, you're almost bred and trained to always defend the Black man in these situations. And so I've heard, people say, well, so and so got away with it, and well, this white executive, nothing has happened to him yet, and there were a lot of charges against him. But I do, want to make sure that we understand that two wrongs don't make a right, right? So, as it relates to something that, that may have happened in terms of, our community, we've got to be able to speak up about it and say that this is not okay for anybody, and there should be some repercussions as a result of what has happened and what has occurred. Devonna, did you want to say something on that?
I agree. Agree 100%. It all starts with conversation. I recall having conversations with my daughters, my children, at a young age, about, let me know if somebody does this to you or does that to you.
Right.
We can't stop. My youngest is 20 now. And so now my conversation with her is more around, date rape and sex trafficking and the sex trafficking rings that are out there, and how pervasive they are and frightening. In the work that I do, I do come across those situations. So we just have to continue the conversation as it relates to that, and educate our daughters, our nieces, the young women that we come in contact with, to be aware and to let them know that they have a safe space, that they do have a safe space to speak up.
Yeah, and we also have to protect our sons too, right? Our sons and our nephews, and because there is a lot of that does occur within the Black community, or just period, to our Black sons as well. And the mindset around being a male and being macho and being able to stand up for yourself in these situations, and to not necessarily claim that you were a victim of something like this, that exists, and that is very real. And there's so much pain, to being able to come forth and say, this has happened to me, because in terms of how it's going to be perceived, right? Especially as a man, or as a boy, or as a child, or, whatever the situation may be. So, Joe, I know you had some thoughts around that in terms of how we also encourage our males to speak up about situations like this that you might want to share.
Yeah. Can I just ask a question of you three women? What do you do let me ask you, do you all remember that one white guy who was on his way to being an Olympic athlete, like a swimmer, and he raped a woman behind a dumpster?
Okay.
And the judge gave him 6 months, and the judge said, I don't think that 2 minutes of a bad decision
Ruined
should
his life.
ruin the rest of his life. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yeah, I
remember.
believe he was he a student maybe at Stanford?
The college.
Yeah,
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah, and he was bound to. He was Olympic material.
Mhm.
Mhm.
How do you, or how do some Black women
Mhm.
in their mind justify turning in a Black predator, knowing
Mhm.
that that white guy got 6 months and is going to get his life back to him?
Mhm.
But if you turn that Black guy in, he
That's
will
it.
be spending the rest of his life in jail, just like the kind of like how they did Bill Cosby. He was ready to spend pretty much the rest of his life in jail until they reversed some of the mistakes they made.
Mhm.
Does that shed a little light on why some of us are reluctant to cooperate with a corrupt judicial system, starting with, let me call the police? Well,
Right.
Mhm.
if they can pick up the phone because they're not killing one of us, if they have the time to pick up the phone, because they're usually locking us up disproportionately. And
Right.
then, so, I think that's one of the reasons why some of us say, shh, talk about it. Just let Uncle Rufus go away. Just let him go away. He'll go 2 states over, and go walk it off, Jethro. Just walk it off. That's how we handle things, because but that's one of the things I have. The other thing to address what you're saying is R. Kelly is an evil person. He is a bad person. He's a predator. He's disgusting. Just to let you know how disgusting he is,
Mm.
it came out in the trial that one of the acts that he did or one of the acts that was involved was defecating.
Mm.
We've heard about the urinating, but there was defecating. And then there were some additional acts that some of the news reporters weren't allowed to report because it was so horrible.
Right.
So he is like disgusting.
Mhm.
But as disgusting and as foul as he is a poor baby victim. And when I say baby victim, here's what I mean. When we go through childhood trauma,
Mhm.
that trauma travels with us into adulthood. And that adult child is still a real entity that we struggle with and rage against daily.
Mhm.
And there's no doubt in my mind. I told you all I do a little research. R. Kelly was sexually molested between the ages of 8 and 14.
Mm.
And it was done by an older woman, family member, and then a family friend, male family friend, sexually molested him. And
Right.
all of these negative adjectives that we are assigning to R. Kelly, we need to assign to them.
Absolutely.
And if the statutes of limitations have not run, and if these people are alive,
Right.
let's give the child in R. Kelly justice.
Right.
If I'm his lawyer, I am going, he didn't testify, so he gets to allocute in front of the judge. And if he chooses to, he can say, I'm defiant, Your Honor, this did not happen, blah, 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 or remain silent, let his lawyers talk. Or he can say, Your Honor, I was found guilty and I did do it. And I'm so sorry and I need help. And he can
Right.
go into a real live explanation of what happened to him.
Right.
At
Well,
50, at 20 something, 30 something, 40 something, I don't know if he went all the way up to the 50s. I know he's been locked up for 2 years. He's 54 years old. But as long as, for most of his adult life, he's been a predator.
Right.
And when you don't get childhood issues addressed,
Right.
he could go into his 80s still being a predator.
Right.
And poor R. Kelly, that childhood trauma was not addressed, was not handled in therapy. And here we are. Here are the results of that.
Absolutely. Right. Unable to save him, and so therefore we were unable to save the others. But how do you course correct someone who is a victim of something like that so it does not end up being they victimize someone else? And
Well,
it
he
does
was,
take, I'm
yeah,
sorry, and it does take the ability to articulate what has happened. It does take the ability to be listened to be heard, and to be able to try to, address the issue that has happened. And that does mean in every situation that you get justice for what has been done.
yeah, yeah. He would do well if he went to a child psychologist and would really break down what happened to him as a child.
Mm.
Because again, a lot of the girls he's attracted to and a lot of the girls that he preys on are would be of the age when his innocence was taken and robbed, and he never developed past that. So he
Right.
needs somebody to talk to that inner R. Kelly child that's still a child and address the child as a victim and bring that child out of its trauma.
Yeah.
And he'll never get over what happened to him, but he needs life skills to learn how to properly place it. It's never going to be um, taken away from him, and it will never be. Um, it will always be a part of him, but
Right.
where it's placed is important, and
Right.
he needs somebody. Now, it may not matter now because he's going to go to jail. Experts say he's going to go to jail, and I'm not an expert, but as a lawyer, and I'm sure um, Devonna will agree with me that he's probably going to go to jail for the rest of his life. He will die in jail. He's 54. He's facing multiple decades in this case. And if
Mhm.
he's found guilty on the other ones, he'll be facing decades in that one also.
Right.
But had he not been captured, the one of the next best thing to protect the community would to address the childhood trauma and sort of release him from that stuck stage that
Right.
he's trapped in,
Right.
you know. And I believe he's crying out for help in a lot of his music.
Right. In terms of the messaging.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Most great musicians do that.
Yeah.
Comedians and musicians, through their artistic performance, are addressing and trying to run from their trauma.
So and Nicole, I'm going to bring you in on this as well. But like a lot of us, how do you separate the musician from the man? I mean, I guess that's probably the best way to do that, in terms of, like, some people are like, no more listening to his music, no more, doing anything with regard to him. Or do you see how some people can separate the man from the music?
So I think that could speak to lots of artists, right?
Right, absolutely.
Similar to what Joseph was saying, whether a musician, and I would expand it, to lots of other genres too, right? Or wealths of knowledge and gifts of art that have been given to us. How do we separate the troubled soul of somebody,
Mhm.
and then their work, their catalog of work that they've produced?
Right.
Some people say it is because of that's how they created some of that catalog of work, right?
Mhm, mhm.
I think as humans, that concept of conflict, depending on your culture, and also experience, can be difficult to separate. For some, they
Mhm.
won't. And that's just going to be the way it is. I'm going to totally put everything in the trash and burn it, and I'm done. And for
Right.
some, they will be able to separate that. I'm not a psychologist, and I can't go into
Right.
the details, but there is definitely belief systems that will come
Mhm.
into play for some people, whether that's
Mhm.
religious or otherwise. And then there's
Mhm.
also the concept of forgiveness and the concept of acceptance and grace. And again, I think that's cultural. and also experiential. So it's going to be interesting to see overall. They're already saying ex-Grammy winner, for example. They're not saying that he's a Grammy Award winner anymore. So some groups have already X out certain things. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, agreed. Well, listen, guys, I know we didn't want to take a whole lot. Joe, I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
I was going to say something very quick about that.
Okay.
My personal opinion is, and not for everybody, because for those people who have gone through what those victims have gone through, now that they know the truth, they may want to run as far away from R. Kelly's music as possible. But for those people who want to understand and study the mindset of a sexual predator, or for those who have transcended a certain amount of trauma and want to understand why would he do this, or what happened to him in his past, listening to his music may bring about some clarity if you listen between the lines. I remember from probably back when I was at Oakwood, for some reason, this is going to sound weird, but the lead singer of Metallica, James Hetfield, I've always had a connection to him. I've always loved him. I've always loved his music. His lyrics have always just resonated with me.
Okay.
And there's just a certain type of fulfillment I get from it when you listen to his lyrics, and I've just always identified to it. Just recently, I started reading about his childhood. And he comes from, and I thought I had it bad, he comes from an extremely religiously abusive household.
Okay.
His father would read the Bible to them to the point where he was in tears, and then his father left them. His parents did not believe in science. So when he went to school, during all his science classes, he had to leave and wait outside of the classroom because God and spirituality was more important than science. And he always felt weird explaining to other teachers and other students why he had to wait outside of the classroom. One other thing.
So you're saying, go ahead.
His mother died of cancer, and the family refused to give her the proper treatment because they believed God would heal her.
Okay.
And he had to grow up with that. And now when I listen to his music, I'm like, I get it, because I went through similar religious abuse like that.
Did he sing about those things, or did you just connect with him, period?
He sang about them, but I didn't know what he was saying. Now that I've read that about him and I go back and listen, I'm like, this guy's singing about me. And I get some type of comfort, connection, and I feel like I have a group therapy thing going on. And that may be healthy for certain people. They can get answers because he is crying out in some of his music. Not all of it, but some of his music he's crying out, and it may be helpful. But other people, they may need to run away from it because it's just too sick. So to each his own, I guess I should say.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, listen, we didn't want to take too much time, but we did not want this verdict to escape the opportunity to have a conversation. So, just going back to the initial question in terms of how the verdict impacts the African American community, I would ask that, each of you, and we'll start with you, Nicole, like, what impact would you want this verdict to have on our community?
I think I go back to my opening comment, was just that we hear what our young people are saying when they want to share something that's traumatizing to them and not dismiss it, and also learn to watch for signs of grooming. I think that is so crucial to not to even wait to after the fact, unfortunately, when it's already happened, but to try to protect our kids and before it happens.
Okay. And Joseph?
I'm hoping that the Black men in our community who've been raped and sexually abused can be brave and come forward. And if it's not the right thing for you to be brave and come forward, you can look at R. Kelly's situation, identify with him. And if you are a Black man who's engaging in predatory behavior towards boys, girls, adults because of your past. I
Mhm.
hope this says, get help. R.
Right.
Kelly didn't get the help he needed. I hope they can say, you know what, I need help. Let me get help so I can stop this. So I hope this empowers, or it can change the behavior of the victims, the black male
Mhm.
victims, which for so long we've been silent because it is so unmanly. It is so
Right.
unmasculine to come
Right.
forward and say, this guy touched me. This
Right.
guy did this to me. So
Right.
I'm hoping that can do.
Absolutely. Devana?
Yes, I just hope that that this empowers victims of sexual abuse, sexual assault, to come forward, to speak with someone that they trust, so that their voices can be heard, so that they can have justice, and so they can also, as Joseph said, get the help that they need, because you know the verdict doesn't end the victim's hurt, and so they need, I would think, again, I'm not a psychologist or a mental health professional, but I would think that they would need some assistance, some professional assistance in working through all of this as well.
Absolutely. And go ahead. Joe, were you going to say something? I thought you
No,
were.
I was saying absolutely, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I also agree, I would hope that what this would do is also empower, Black women specifically, and to let them know that they can be heard, they should be heard, and they deserve the same level of respect and protection, in the law and in our community, that everyone deserves. And so, I definitely want for them to feel that, you don't have to suffer in silence, that there can be positive outcomes to a negative situation. So with that, I want to thank you all for joining us for this special edition of Healthy Heart Nation Conversations, where we are dealing with the R. Kelly verdict. We ask that you all stay tuned, you follow us, you support us, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, as we are looking to bring some additional impact to the African American community through the areas of health, education, justice, and business. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you.